This is the 18th season of Bass Talk Live. With your host, Matt Pangrath. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, AFCO, Duck It Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, and Pro Guide Batteries.
BTL, coming at you!
Good morning and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Bass Talk Live BTL, where we're going to talk bass fishing, and believe it or not, we're going to start out by also talking about weather. It is crazy here in Oklahoma. 14 degrees. Was driving 25, 30 miles an hour for the last 20 miles to the studio, and I didn't know it could rain at 16 degrees. But it can rain at 16 degrees and it immediately turns to ice on your windshield. So very fortunate to get into the studio today. An ode to Mark Jeffries, who would have spent the entire first segment talking about the weather. And we're probably going to talk about the weather a little bit later because we have a great guest lineup today. The president of the Tnpfl, the National Professional Fishing League. They kick off their second season. I'm used to calling it the inaugural season. It is now the second season of the Tnpfl. And I think they had to call it the Tnpfl instead of the NPFL because there's like a cricket league in India or something like that that's the NPFL. I don't know. I'll ask Brad about that. I don't know if that's a deal. But they kick off on Lake Cumberland in Kentucky, a place that's very near and dear to my heart with the Costa Series championship that I had there a couple years ago. Probably my best finish at the AAA level. And the place is full of fish, but they are dealing with some adverse conditions. Water on the rise, muddy water, freezing conditions. And it's kind of Brad's job to wrangle all 121 of the anglers that are back for the second season of the National Professional Fishing League. We're going to get Brad in to talk about what to expect. And, dude, I'm going to ask him about last year, about the end. They had a great live stream throughout the entire events with Luke Duncan and Fat Cat and Dudley and the 10 boats and the 3 days of coverage. And then the championship got canceled and everything was kind of in limbo for a number of months. Didn't hear much from the league, but they came back, and I think it's an ode to how many of those anglers still have faith in that organization, that they must have done some of the right things, made some adjustments, and they're back stronger than ever for the second year of the National Professional Fishing League. Then in the second half of the show, this is one that I've been waiting for a long time. Scott Palmer, they call him the Mad Scientist, one of the owners of the Bass Tank up there in Tulsa. We've had John Sokup in studio before. He's actually competing on the National Professional Fishing League this week on Cumberland. Scott was originally going to be in studio, and we were going to take calls and questions and all things regarding electronics. We're going to kind of get down into the basics of how 2D works, how side imaging works, how forward-facing sonar works, just basically all the stuff that you don't see but that helps you read, see, know how your electronics work. But we're still going to do that. It's just he is now back in, I'm not sure where he is, somewhere around Tulsa, and he's going to be in via live stream in the second half of the show. We do have some tournament action that is going on right now. The second stop of the BPT on Lake Fork. They are in the knockout round now. Alton Jones and Jacob Wheeler are not fishing. They pretty much destroyed everybody in the opening two rounds to go directly to the finals. And now they remaining, I think 38 anglers that are on the water have to fish in 30-some degrees with sleet and things on Lake Fork. But we've seen some big bags come in there. But I would say not as impressive as what went on in the Toyota Series yesterday, the opening Toyota Series. Yes, it started on a Tuesday, which was kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But, dude, they had like 320 boats in the Toyota Series, maybe even more than that because they looked like there were a bunch at zeroed. But imagine coming in on Guntersville, which was pretty tough. And, you had a decent day. Let's say you knocked out 15 pounds on Guntersville this time of year, changing conditions. You're in 72nd place. There were 72 bags over 15 pounds to crack the top 10 after day one. Took 21-2. And leading the way is Nathan Brewer and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. The dude came in with 28 pounds, 5 ounces of smallmouth bass in the Toyota Series on Gunnersville. I think there's not very many places that you can get to from that fishery where you can catch 28 pounds of smallmouth bass. But I know there was a fog delay this morning. It will be very interesting to see how those 300 and some plus boats deal with that. Let's get a little bit of business in before we bring Brad Fuller in. And I've kind of been following this story, and it came back up in the news yesterday, actually with like an apology. But, we like to compare other sports to professional bass fishing in this. And there's a lot that has gone on in the world of professional bass fishing over the past 5 years. Obviously, we had the split between MLF and bass. We had the creation of the Tnpfl. We had a lot of movement between tours. Jeffries, before his retirement, talked a lot about, and I've kind of been following it, how something similar is going on in bowling. They had the same thing that went on with the Major League Lacrosse and them splitting, trying to get more player, angler, participant kind of role, ownership role, more of the money splitting. It's happened in rodeo and bull riding, obviously, and it's also happening in golf. And this is something that I'm sure if you golf, you're well aware of. But there is a new league that is being formed, and I'll just read in. Phil Mickelson, one of the probably definite Hall of Famer in his golf, it kind of sounded off about this the beginning of the month. It said Phil Mickelson, who is playing in this week's Saudi International, has been rumored to be one of the preeminent targets for the yet-to-be-formed Super Golf League, SGL, and had some interesting things to say about the PGA Tour while playing in Saudi Arabia. He said it's not public knowledge all that goes on with the PGA Tour, he said, but the players don't have access to their own media. If the tour wanted to end any threat from Saudi or anywhere else, they could just hand back the media rights to the players, but they would rather throw $25 million here or $40 million there than give back the roughly $20 billion in digital assets they control, or give up access to the $50+ million they make every year on their own media channel. So it's just interesting to see some of the top guys. And then I don't think that he would be allowed to play if he ended up going over to this other league. But then he came out today with yesterday with like an apology, kind of talking about that it was off the record, that he is still dedicated to the PGA. It says some of the world's top professional golfers have recently reiterated their commitment to the PGA Tour, including Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, and Bryson DeChambeau. But the whole thing about this new tour is more control for the players over their own media and bigger payouts. Sounds kind of familiar to some things that have gone on in the professional fishing world. All right, let's get to our first guest of the day. He is taking time out of his busy schedule. I'm sure he's fielding a lot of questions with all of the weather-related concerns that are going on. Let's get to Mr. Brad Fuller, the president of the Tnpfl. Brad, I really appreciate you joining me on BTL on a very icy Wednesday morning here in Moore, Oklahoma.
Hey, Matt, I promise you that I would much rather be with you and your listeners right now than listening to what's coming out of the angler's mouth. So, yeah, man, it's going to be a nice little break here for a half hour. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's all good. Like I said, the season kicks off tomorrow on Lake Cumberland, a really good fishery, a really diverse fishery. I think an incredible tournament fishery, offers largemouth bass, spotted bass, and smallmouth bass. The smallmouth have to be 18 inches, largemouth 15, and spotted bass 12. But just kind of fill the listeners in on what to expect for kickoff week for the second season of the NPFL.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So, look, man, we set out to do different things, not to be different, but we just didn't want to chase Florida in this time of year, right? So we knew that coming north or further north, it was going to be feast or famine. Either this was going to be a knock it out of the park event where we smash giant smallmouth, 17, 18-pound bags every day, or it could be really tough. We literally have, if I would have written down my worst conditions for our first event, we have not just rising water, but falling water. The water is fluctuating a lot. We have high winds. We've had flash floods. They're doing maintenance on the dam as well. So they're really trying to keep the water down, but they just can't keep up with the inflow. So it's made it very, very tough on the guys. Now, with that being said, there's still some guys catching them, and they're just going along with the, oh, it's so tough. I've got one bite in 17 days of practice. So I know there's guys catching them. So, we're holding out. Here's the thing, man. The only option we came up with, I told you earlier, was canceling tournament, renting out the bingo hall, and handing out the $500,000 purse playing bingo. Right. So our sponsors aren't too happy with that idea. So we're going to have a bass tournament this week and write someone a check for $50K.
That being said, all of the obstacles that you're facing going into the opening day of your second season, man, looking back over the past 2 years, if you knew that you'd be sitting here with 121 anglers, basically a full field, what you wanted, paying $50,000 to the winner, and the second season starting tomorrow, even with the sucky conditions, you'd take that in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, man, it 100%. I am extremely humbled. And we all feel very blessed to even be here. So we're happy. 40 anglers are going to be happy. But yeah, man, we're very, very happy about where we are at the NPFL right now.
Where do you think the NPFL fits in the tournament fishing structure? I'm just kind of curious to see where you see that, you have the Elite Series, you have the BPT, you have a Pro Circuit, then you have Opens, Toyota. Where does the NPFL fit in that?
Well, let me first start by saying that we don't compare ourselves to anybody, right? Like that's for people like, that's your job and Terry Brown and all the guys, right? Like we simply wake up in the morning and say, we're going to work very, very hard to make this a great experience for the anglers. So, but of course we know where we fit in, right? Like you don't have to be a rocket science. I think we are an opportunistic league. There are guys fishing our league right now that people have never heard of that I promise you by the end of this year, the Tyler Umlands, the Trent Palmers, and there's a lot of anglers that are going to use this to make themselves a national brand, and they're going to parlay that into sponsorship deals, and they're going to monetize that. So the biggest thing we did last year, Matt, on the positive note, was we proved that we could nationally brand an angler, right? We could take someone who's a regional rock star that, he's a catcher. He's one of those guys that says, hey, man, that guy can catch him. And we made him a national brand. And they, in turn, were able to monetize that and start to gain dollars and put money in the bank based on that success. That we had to be able to do that.
And you did a good job. Obviously, you did that with Keith Carson, your Angler of the Year last year, Brandon Perkins, Bryant Smith, John Sokup, Taylor Watkins. The top 5 in your Angler of the Year, as well as other anglers who had great events. But, you're seeing those anglers are now, kind of household names at the top. And the NPFL did have a big role in that.
Absolutely. And it was, I know we're going to get, you and I spoken, and that's why we did so many good things last year, man. Like it was unbelievable. And it made it even worse the way it ended, right? And we've been pretty quiet about it. I was glad when you reached out because I really wanted to get on with you and talk about it, right? And obviously it's a business. There's things we're not going to talk about. There's things we're not going to disclose. But we've hung our hat on this transparency thing, and it just hasn't been the right time. Because look, man, it's the busiest I've ever been in my life. Like it's been crazy, but we're here and we're super proud of that.
That's awesome. We're talking with the president of the Tnpfl, Brad Fuller, and he alluded to it. And let's get into that now. So last year, the inaugural season started out Lake Eufaula, Wright Patman, Harris Chain, Pickwick, Winnebago, Grand Lake, a great mix of slugfests, really tough fisheries that people had never heard of or been to before. And then it was scheduled, the season ended roughly the beginning of October. Championship was scheduled. Was it originally the top 20 in the Angler of the Year, I believe, or top 25?
Top 25, yeah.
Top 25 in the Angler of the Year standings. It was scheduled on Nickajack Lake for November 11th, and then he started hearing rumors that maybe it was going to be postponed, that maybe something was going on with the league, that something was happening. That's all we heard, and then there was a statement that the championship was canceled. And that's really all we heard from the NPFL front offices. Obviously a lot of anglers talk and you hear things, and And the next thing we kind of heard was, hey, we're going ahead with the 2022 season. But there was a big gap in there. And I think we had some fans of BTL and some fans of the NPFL that felt like, man, we kind of got invested. We followed this all 3 days with all the live coverage. We got this. And then, boom, it was pulled from under us right before the championship. So as much as you want to get into what happened between that stop at the beginning of October at Grand and the cancellation of the championship on Nickajack.
So to put this in kind of layman's terms, and it's really much more complicated than this. Al, Paul, and I went over to Nickajack. We did the site survey. I called Keith. I'm like, hey man, we're going to do an AOY dinner. Like, I want you to do an AOY speech. Like, I want you to kind of talk about your, whatever you want to talk about. Like, we were going to Nickajack. So literally the week before the championship, I was actually out of town, and my wife called me and was very, very upset. And we had an investor that pulled all his investment with zero notice. Obviously, you can imagine with something kind of going on like that, there's a lot of legalities there where we have to kind of be very careful. And look, man, I'm not interested in satisfying the appetite of the people who want to know the dirty details, right? Like, but I am here to do exactly what you said, Matt. We had a great following last year. I personally feel like we owe those people an explanation. And I'm going to tell you, here's what people don't understand, or maybe they do. Michelle and I have sunk everything in our life into this. This isn't a pickup game, man. This isn't something. I spent the bulk of my life overseas doing horrible things to horrible people, and I loved it. And it gave me the opportunity to be able to come back home and start something like this with two great partners in Al and Paul. And it was hard. Like, we literally watched everything we'd worked for 25 years. Just like that, it was gone. And even with all that being said, when we got on the call and started talking to lawyers and all this, I said, you guys got to understand something. I don't care about me, Michelle, Al, Paul. Every angler that we owe something to will be taken care of. I don't care if the NPFL was gone and it takes Michelle and I 25 years to work that off. But every single dude who invested in us will 100% be taken care of, period. And that's just the way we went about it. So, we started exploring options, and look, Matt, this was a little bit of divine intervention. I don't know where your audience is as far as, with their beliefs and stuff, but there's only one reason we're here, is because it was meant to be, right? I had to raise an enormous amount of capital from a Thursday to a Monday over a holiday weekend. It was literally impossible. Like, I was like, I have to go through the motions because I owe it to the guys to try. By Sunday night at 11 p.m., I'd secured all the investment funding we needed to, on paper, execute a 2022 season and take care of all the anglers that we promised. So what we did was we said, hey guys, we can't have a tournament. I can't fiscally support the logistics and the streaming and all. I can't do it. Like, it's just not there. What I can do is take the $250,000 purse, divide it by the number of anglers, and give each of you $10,000, right? So that's what we did. That's the best way I could move forward with making it right. Was it fair? Someone should have got 50 and the rest of the guys should have got 5. But that was just the fairest way we knew to execute that, and that's what we did. We made amends with every person in that championship field. That was step one. Step two was making sure that the guys knew and understood what was going on. I didn't care about the thing. I'm just being honest with you. I was dedicated to the anglers, and we started getting on the phone and talking to them. So that's the way all that went down. We have we're better off today, Matt, with the investor that we do have, because they understand fishing. They understand, and they're only here because of us. He's like, the only reason I'm coming here is because of you, Michelle, Al, and Paul, and what you did for the anglers in the NPFL that they watched from the outside looking in. So yeah, that's it. Hit me with your questions.
When you kind of wrapped up that 2021 season, took care of the anglers who'd made the championship, you were still in a very precarious position, because if there's one thing that I know as a tournament angler, I mean, we've seen major tournament trails in Oklahoma and other states, something happens, and once an angler loses belief or trust in that organization, dude, it's impossible to come back from that. I mean, it's a sinking ship, and it's sinking fast. But it seems like with 121 boat field, the number of anglers that returned, I'd say over 90% return rate. Just looking at 80-90% return rate, would you say? What is your return rate on?
Between 80 and 90. We have 121. We brought in 45 new guys. You start doing the math. So, we ended up 103 last year. So about 80%.
And then also some new additions that we're going to get into. You guys must have done something right to maintain and then regain that trust going into 2022. So
two things. If we were absent owners, like if we were just the guys who were the money and they didn't see us on it, dude, we're like in the morning, when you called me earlier, Matt, I was actually at the ramp. Like it'll be me, Paul, Michelle, three or four of our staff guys. Like this is not a great place to have a tournament for what we're doing. Like just the ramp setup, you know what I mean? So we're going to be driving the trucks. I was like, look guys, we're going to get our cardio in the morning, because this is what we need to do to execute this tournament. We did that at every event, and the anglers saw that and they appreciated that. And I'll be honest, it was more important to me of how we handled things with the anglers than it was even necessarily what we ended up doing. We got them on a Zoom call, and I was pretty direct. Let's just say that there was no ambiguities about what was going on. And man, you had guys like that we lost as a league that really hurt, right? Because they called and said, hey man, I've got to have my pro circuit deposits in. I don't what do I need to do? And I said, hey man, I can't guarantee you right now that the NPFL will even exist next year. You need to do what's best for you and don't worry about what's going on with the NPFL, right? And that hurt. I didn't want to do that. And we lost a lot of guys over that, but it's what was best for that angle, right? And I hope that earns us something down the road with those guys that, hey man, I said, hey, you need to go fish the pro circuit, in my opinion. And we had guys that went and did that, and I'm very proud that they got in there and they're doing really well.
Which leads to, obviously, the first stop starts on Cumberland. You guys have a great schedule lined up on paper here. Cumberland, Hartwell, Watts Bar, Saginaw Bay, Sandusky, Kissimmee in October to close it out, but noticeably absent, no championship this year. So talk about some of the changes there are as far as kind of the live stream coverage, the championship, the payout structure, the lessons that you learned from the inaugural season that you take into season number 2.
Yeah. So first and foremost, man, it was so much fun last year, right? Like it was just, I think I know you're good buddies with Holman. Like but what we didn't do, so I'm going to tell you how we're doing things this year. And then, but I'm going to say this up front. This is what it should have looked like last year, right? So look, we wanted to come out and punch people in the face with the NPFL, right? Like we wanted, and if we would have gotten the support we were promised and obligated to, we would have done that. And what we didn't have was a plan B if that didn't happen. Let me correct. I did leave something out. We did have a plan B, but that was a sinking ship, like you said, right? So my plan B quickly was pulled as well. And man, it was something that we had to go through. And I'm going to tell you why here in a second. This year we are only streaming on the second 2 days of the tournament. So we are going to live stream on Thursday and Friday from 8 a.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern. We will have 5 cameras in boats with anglers, and we will have 1 roaming on the water commentator, which is going to be James Watson this year.
Oh, cool.
So we literally cut the streaming cameras in half. But here's what we did too, Matt, is we went back and looked, what was the dissemination of the data? Because we look at things in data, not streaming minutes, across the 10 cameras. You spent the bulk of your time on, it's actually 6 guys, right? The other 4 guys rarely got on camera because they didn't catch them, right? So we felt pretty good about going to 5. We feel like we could run 5 cameras and an on-the-water commentator and literally have 0. You would never know it if you were watching last year's stream compared to this stream, just based on camera switching. We still get the quad box. We still have plenty of anglers. And I'm not guessing on day 1. because it's going to go on the top 5 from day one. So you would suspect, hey, they may not catch him, but they certainly caught him on day one, which would lead you to say, hey, there's a higher than average chance that those guys are going to move. The day one, we are going to attempt to stream the weigh-in just on Facebook. So we can kind of, but what this allows us to do is use our shooters from Trend Visuals Media, Travis and Tanner Lyons. It allows us to let them build the story via social on day one. They're going to be in the boat with Watson. They're going to be doing interviews with Watson. So we're going to tell the story of day one, how the storylines are coming out of this on social and drive people to the stream. So I know you and Mark are big into the business side of this, right? So let me ask you this. We don't know what's going to happen. Our stream numbers may be virtually in half of what they were, but what if we can build the viewership to come on Friday and we match our viewership numbers with only 2 days of streaming? Fiscally, my cost per viewer just got cut by a third. You know what I mean? So we're going to try this. And here's the biggest thing from the business, Matt. I'm not worried about 2022. 2022 is done. Our budget's done. Our fiscal, we are literally negotiating with sponsors right now. We did close one yesterday, and I'm going to announce that sponsor here if you'll let me at the end of the show. Yeah. But that's all icing on top of the cake, right? Like we're fiscally viable through the season, and we'll stay that way. Now we're already working on 2023. Paul Bentz is in the lobby right now having a meeting with the sponsor about 2023. This is the way it's supposed to work. Right. This is the way we're in the groove now. We're in the cycle of the same one that Bass and FLW and MLF are in. It just took us a while to figure it out, but we figured it out. Like we're in the mix with everybody now. So we're not fighting upstream trying to get sponsors when their budgets are already done.
That's cool. And then I would assume part of that is also analyzing the championship this year. Is there going to be more of like a payout through the Angler of the Year field then, or instead of spending a lot more money putting on an entire championship?
I'll be honest. I'm going to throw Brad Knight under the bus here. Yeah, I think he enjoys that. And he'll let me know if he doesn't. Brad said, hey, man, I don't care about a championship. I was like, what?
And he's won one.
Really, he goes, unless it's like the Forest Wood Cup, unless it's like the Classic, right? Because what's my reward for fishing my butt off all year to make a championship? I get to fish for my money again. Like, just pay me the money up front, right? Like, so, and what he means by that is you're out there competing for AOI. So what we did and what we're looking at, and I'm curious, we're going to pay the top 10 in AOI. Like, it's not where we want it to be. Like, you know what I mean? Like, clearly, but what if we just keep dumping money in that AOI where you get to, hey, man, I'm going to give you $200,000 if you win AOI, right? Or something crazy like that. And we pay way down the field. Look, man, I will tell you, I love Brad. I want a championship. Like, it's something that's visibly and noticeably missing from the NPFL. It's going to change the dynamic of how we have a live stream. I've already talked to Luke and Fat Cat about it and Watson. Like, it's just different. And but like I said, if you pick up this year and make this our inaugural season, it doesn't bite as hard. What bites hard is we came out of the gate swinging like a trunk monkey with 17 baseball bats, beating everybody in the face with the NPFL live, and we couldn't afford it. Right?
That's expensive, isn't it? Ridiculously expensive to do 10 streaming cameras for 3 days with the studio on location and everything going on. I mean, we were sitting back here going, holy cow, like, this has got to be, I mean, I don't know what numbers, but it's a lot of money.
Millions. That's plural for the fans at home. And here's the deal, man. Matt, we were so close. Like, I'm talking, when you're talking scale of economy in millions, and we missed it by just a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't miss it by much. But here's where we go. That model was not sustainable, right? Like, it eventually would have caught up with it. That's why I told Michelle, I was like, Michelle's my wife, by the way. She's one of the main partners in here with me. I said, look, I'm so happy now that we're on the other side of it. It put us on the path to longevity. That path we were on was not a path to longevity. We can provide a service to anglers to come out, fish for substantial money on a live stream, a platform where you can promote your product and your sponsors, or you could just be like Trent Palmer and go, hey, man, I have no aspiration of being a professional angler. I just want to compete, and I'm here to compete. So we're excited, man.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's been a long the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life, Matt. Like hands down, just the emotional roller coaster. I was a mess. My family was a mess. My parents were a mess. Like my dog was a mess. But hey, man, when you struggle through something like that, it really makes you look at the world different when you come out the other side of it, right? So listen, I'm glad to be here. I don't think there's very many anglers happy to be here right now, but we're going to go have a bass tournament tomorrow and kick this thing off and see what happens.
Hey, you mentioned Brad Knight. I just want to also mention the list of anglers competing in 2022 is on the National Professional Fishing League website, which is just the nationalprofessionalfishingleague.com. But Brad Knight, obviously Forest Wood Cup, Quentin Capo had a good career on the Elite Series, Jason Williamson fishing it, Daryl Davison, and then there is Patrick Walters. I saw that. You got like the Patrick I know we have John Cox, and I always try to give John Cox credit because John Cox is a good angler. Everyone's like, well, the John Cox. I'm like, he is the John Cox. He can't help what his name is. He's still John Cox. He still catches bass. He's just not from DeBerry, Florida, and doesn't catch 32 pounds a day sight fishing sometimes. Yeah, anyway, but this is the Patrick Walters that's fishing the NPFL this year.
Well, man, I hope he's not mad at me. But here's the deal. I got a call from Patrick the first day of practice, Sunday morning. I was like, hey, man, what's up? He's like, man, I'm in trouble. I'm like, oh, I thought he was broke down. You know, he's swimming to shore with his phone in his hand. He said, I screwed up my schedule. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, bro, I start practice for the Classic on Friday.
Oh, yeah, he does.
And he was here. He drove to Cumberland. In the house with Kimmel and Palmer, and I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm driving home." I was like, "All right, man. Well, listen, drive safe. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I'll see you at the Classic." But yeah, so we got one medical exemption for this term. The field is 123 for the year.
Okay.
And Matt, you touched on that. To go through what we went through, and then to be sitting, dude, we needed 103 to execute, right? Like that was our execution number, and we ended up at 123, almost a full field. And we're going to probably expand the field a little bit this year to make up for the delta on the angler revenue that we're missing from those few anglers. But yeah, Patrick, good luck at the Classic.
He's
man. I hope
from
you
the
win
Carolinas. So wait. He was in Florida. He drove from where the Classic is to Kentucky and went, and then had to drive back.
And if you know Patrick, I was like, man, I'm just disappointed I'm not going to get to see that horrible mustache.
Oh, that is wild. One of the things I want to kind of wrap up with then is on the live stream side. I know that you had David Dudley last year. You had Brad Hallman fill in. You already mentioned that you said Worldwide's going to be the on the water guy. Now, at the end of the year last year, you did have Fat Cat fill in studio with Luke Duncan, and I don't know Fat Cat that well, but he's got a persona about him, and I was really impressed with his ability to kind of merge the personality with knowledge, skill-based, break it down for those 3 days. So he's going to be sitting next to Luke this year in the director's chair, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like you, Matt. I was super impressed, and to see the growth by Fat Cat, B as we call him, over the past 12, 16 months has been amazing. And we felt like he earned that spot. And dude, I think he's going to continue to grow, and Luke's excited. We're all excited. I think those two, both knowledge, and then what I tell them is, hey man, we've got to have fun. Like I'm not looking for you in a 3-piece triple-breasted suit with your hair slicked back. Like I want Luke and I want Fat Cat. That's why I pay you. That's why I hired you. That's what I want. And that's what we expect. Same thing with Watson. I'm like, man, try to make me rein you guys in. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I dare you. And when you tell those three guys, they're going to cash in on that favor this year. And I'm going to have to call and go, don't ever do that again. But that's okay. That's what the NPFL is all about, is pushing the envelope and making sure that we're having fun.
And Luke's back for a second year. I thought he did a great job last year as well.
Yeah. Luke's a professional, man. And it's not that Luke, what I mean by that is, listen, if you've never had the experience to do a live show with a director, so you got to understand, when he's sitting there, he's listening to the director talk to the cameraman. He's listening to the director call the show in the studio, and he's watching all 10 cameras commentating on what's going on. It's not easy. And then he's the guy in charge of keeping you on schedule, the master clock. hey, at 30, 31, 17, I need you to put me out to this segment, or you know what I mean? So he's a pro, and B will tell you, he's like, man, it's just impressive on how fluid and how easy Luke makes that look.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I did it for the FLW Tour a couple years ago with my buddy Travis Moran, and the earpiece and the way he kept things on track. I'm like, boy, I'm glad I'm over here doing the commentating and not running the show. You did mention earlier in the show possibly a sponsor announcement that you want to. Do you want to end the show with that?
Yeah, man. You tell me. It's your show.
Have at it.
So, guys, we're super proud to announce. Look, when we go out and acquire these sponsors, we really try not to be dollar chasers, right? We want relationship. So we're proud to announce that Pro Guy Batteries is on board for the rest of this year, and they're going to be the official battery of the NPFL. Pate, the owner, Matt Looney, the product rep, Matt also fishes with us. And it wasn't an easy deal, right? It had to be good for both parties. So we're with Pro Guy Batteries for 2022 and very proud of that fact. What sucks is I just bought a new set of lithiums, Pro Guy lithiums, just before we got this deal. So I'm like, I want those 3 batteries to go towards our credit for what we sell for you guys this year. But anyway, the other one is beat down mounts, right? I know John runs beat down mounts. Kevin Rogers runs beat down mounts. I have a prototype for the PHX 21 on my boat that Blake and his dad did up. Listen, guys, we're running a piece tomorrow. If you're a live scoper, beat down mounts is the best option for your boat, and we're going to show you that throughout the year. But here's what beat down mounts is doing, Matt. We want guys to enter accurate weights into Weigh Live, right? So we've set up the Weigh Live tracker for the NPFL to show you the delta between what the angler put in and what his actual official tournament weight is.
Awesome.
The guy who's the closest, the angler who's the closest after the whole week is going to get a beat down mount.
Oh, brilliant. So you're basically coercing compliance instead of, I got 5 2-pounders.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So
that's the smartest thing I've heard in the past year, Brad.
Yeah. Well,
Ike Anelli will never fish your tour then. He'll never get a beat down mount.
Well, neither will David.
Ike's always 15 pounds over.
So mark my word. Write this down. David Gaston, Brandon Perkins will never win that mount, ever. They will never win it. It's not in their DNA. They can't do it.
I like it. That's a great idea. Brad, you got a big derby to run. Follow it on the social media, on the TNPFL Facebook, Instagram channels, and then starting Friday and Saturday, live stream coverage from Lake Cumberland with Luke Duncan and Fat Cat in studio and James Worldwide on the water.
That's it.
On the National Professional Fishing League.com. Dude, I greatly appreciate it, Brad.
Hey, Matt, thank you for the opportunity, and you guys be safe and drive safe getting home today. Tell Scott I said hey.
Will do. Have fun. Have fun with this one.
Yeah, man, I will.
All right. That was Brad Fuller, president of the NPFL, and greatly appreciate him coming on and talking about all things that went down. Like I said, not a good deal that went down in 2021, but as very impressed with how they were able to rebound in 2022 and a great home for a number of very talented anglers, including John Soka, whose partner in crime, I guess, buddy, work partner, Scott Palmer, is on next. His nickname is the Mad Scientist. And Scott, whenever I have any question about anything, I remember I called Scott. Anytime I'm on the water and something doesn't work right, which over the past 3 years has only been twice, and both of them were my fault, I call him, and the dude is like an encyclopedia of every single unit that's ever been made and how to troubleshoot it, and he doesn't even have to look anything up. It's really impressive. So, like I said, Scott was going to be in studio, but the Mad Scientist, I didn't want to make him drive in this stuff. I probably shouldn't have driven in this stuff. But we're going to take a break. We're going to get Scott Palmer in on the live stream, and we will be back with the second half of BTL on a Wednesday. We'll be back.
The Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Your choice of powerful fish-finding tools, all connected. From sonar and trolling motor to navigation and networking. To fit the way you fish. All with touchscreen control from HDS Live, the heart of your system. Find more, see more, catch more with the Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Upgrade to the ultimate fishing system and get up to $1,000 cash back.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
So, you're looking to buy fishing electronics, huh? Are you also looking for true experts to help guide you through it? Well, at the Bass Tank, you've come to the right place. We are live forward-facing sonar pioneers with thousands of hours spent learning through winning trophies, cashing checks, and just having fun. Whatever brand you need, we have it. We offer free shipping, and we have 2 financing options available. Our experts are here to help you. Call us today or visit thebasstank.com.
The new Android series is the peak of the Denali lineup and offers the ultimate Denali experience. The Android series features 36-ton multi-directional graphite combined with interlock blank technology for added strength. Each rod is outfitted with Royal titanium guides that will not fail. The blank is fitted into an easy-touch, soft-feel EVA foam grip with exposed blank reel seat. This all allows the Android to transmit every movement of your bait and even the most subtle bites. The Android series is the finest rod Denali has ever made and offers an angler the ultimate fishing experience with a limited lifetime warranty. See the full lineup of Android rods at DenaliRods.com.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
Welcome back to BTL. On a Wednesday, we just got done talking with president of the NPFL, Brad Fuller, who really kind of opened up about what went on with the NPL at the end of last year with canceling it and then how they rebounded to start the 2022 season tomorrow on Lake Cumberland. I'm not going to lie, I talked to a couple guys there, and they were like, it's muddy, it's cold, the water's coming up, 18-inch smallmouth are hard to catch. Can't figure out how to catch these 12-inch spotted bass either, and I think 5 or 6 pounds a day over 3 days might cash a check. I'm like, that does not sound fun. But what does sound fun is talking to the mad scientist from the Bass Tank, and that would be Scott Palmer, and he is our next guest. Scott, I wish you were in studio, but it is good to see your face and talk to you now.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? I changed the headphones, hopefully to give you better audio.
Yeah, we got you. You're good. You did find some plug-in headphones, and we were talking with Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. Where are you located, actually? I know where the Bass Tank is located there, but how far is your drive into the studio? You're not there now, I don't think. I don't remember seeing that backdrop in the Bass Tank studios.
Yeah, no, I'm actually at my house. It's the roads are getting pretty nasty. I'm actually about 30 minutes south of our office. And so it would have been about a normal 2.5 hour drive from my house to studio. So it's with deteriorating road conditions, I think this was the best call.
Dude, you're a tournament fisherman. You fish a lot of tournaments. You're ate up with it just as much as about anybody that I have ever been around. Fair assessment?
Yeah.
Does it surprise you how many anglers are just champing at the bit to get in on these kind of professional and AAA levels? You've got waiting lists in the triple digit for all three of the Bassmaster Opens with full fields of 230 boats. You have 330 boats in the Toyota series that's going on right now at Gunnersville. You have 121 anglers that are paying $5,000 a pop to compete in this Tnpfl that's kicking off this year. And it's just amazing to me, saying that, fishing all 9 opens and knowing what the cost is to travel across the country to fish these $1,500 to all the way up to $5,000 entry fee tournaments with such a top-end heavy payout to get a return on your investment. Does it blow your mind how many people are out there in the position to do that?
It doesn't blow my mind as far as people wanting to do it, but it does blow my mind just to, the people are in the position to do it, because it's not just the money that we spend on tournaments, but it's the time off work. Most of these guys, they're going to have some sponsorships to maybe help some of that cost, but what employers, their employers are doing without their employees to go be able to practice, to be able to compete. These high level tournaments, you can't show up the day before like you can potentially a regional tournament. You've got to be on the water and practicing. Ask the guys on Cumberland right now. They're not enjoying being on the water this week, I promise you, but you have to do it. So yeah, it is a little bit mind blowing, but it also starts with a dream, and when you and I were in high school, we're close to the same age. Mm-hmm. There was no such thing as high school fishing, right? Let's start there. And now you're seeing the influx of every little school around has a high school fishing team. And you can go to college now on a fishing scholarship. It has grown and continually grown. And so it's actually a realistic dream goal, I guess, if you will, for these younger guys to be able to, hey, I can actually make a profession out of this. Now, I don't think we need to start teaching them some of the backside of the work. It's not, I think there's guys that want to go fish for a living, and then there's professional fishermen. And there's two different things. To be a professional fisherman, you have to put in the work, study the lakes, be on the water. People don't understand the amount of time, John's my business partner, so I get to see the backside of what he goes through. And that dude burns the candle at both ends of the week.
It's scary how hard
it really is
doing something. Yeah,
it truly is. But there's just a lot of work that goes into it. And then keep your sponsors happy. It's not just on the water. It's not just about cashing a check. It's about selling products for your sponsors. And I hate it's that way, but it is. That's the reality of it. This is a business, right? It's an industry.
Yeah. Speaking of business and industry, just kind of break down where you stand in the bass tank empire that has been built over the past, 3, 4, 5 years, and kind of what your job, your role is. I always talk about, you guys talk about the hype man, Z, kind of the crappie guy, the guy who comes on and tells what's new. You've got John, who's kind of what I would say kind of the face of it with him fishing and winning the tournaments. You've got Darren and guys in the back who do the install, and then there's you. Like, kind of where do you fit in, and what is your primary role with the bass tank?
We've assembled a really fantastic team, and any successful business is going to start there. It always comes down to your employees, and I hate even calling them employees. They're team members. They are my guys. My job, my role is to get out of their way, to arm them with the tools that they need and support them. I mean, that's it. I may start off the day messing something, with a website or a technical question, and I may end the day running who knows what errand, going getting lunch. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to define my role because
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know what I'm going to do on a day-to-day basis from the standpoint of, it's not like I show up, okay, and then I've got to send this email and this email. My guys, the hype man, he's up there making sales. We've got another guy up there, Austin Odell. He's up there making sales. My job is to make sure they have the tools available to them to support our customers and answer the phone and, handle that. Then I've got my shipping guys. Again, my job is to make sure that they have the tools at their disposal to ship product, to get our product to the customer. And then Darren, who's a rock star, he's pretty self-sufficient, but guess what? There's times he says, Scott, I need you, and jump that. So if that is going on, then I can step into the, right now we're in this time of technology. There's no way around it. We're in a time of technology. There's more new units, new technology across all brands coming out, probably in a history of fishing. If you take any, like 4-year span, I would say there's been more technology released now in that small window than there ever has been. So if you want to claim to be the expert, like we claim to be, you've got to stay on top of it. So I spend a lot of time researching, playing. Here's where the mad scientist comes into it. People would be probably scared if they saw my laboratory at my house. There's wires and things that go, whirring in the background. It's pretty impressive. I like it, and that's where one of my passions is. I always want to know how things work and why they work that way. So, does that answer your question at all, or are you still more confused?
I mean, you could have done it a little simpler. You could have said Zeke sells the stuff, John uses the stuff, Darren installs the stuff, and I know how the stuff works. And anytime they all three have a question about anything they don't know, I know about all three of them, so they come to me.
Yeah. Okay, what Matt said. We'll go with what you said there, because that's actually probably right.
Which is why I wanted to get you on today, because I don't understand how the units work. I don't understand why sometimes I come in and you guys are like, why would you do that? That affects your screen. I don't understand why you sometimes look at a unit and go, why is this jacked all the way up? Like, that affects your clarity.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I can't be the only one, because I use electronics a lot, not as much as John or as much as some of the guys, but as a whole, I kind of grew up in that electronic age. I've incorporated it, and I've been friends with John to where he's like, hey, look at this. And I'm like, I want that. I don't have that. And you've beat me 7 tournaments in a row.
Yeah.
So I want to start out with the absolute basics.
Yeah.
And this kind of stems from the Pro Guide battery interview I did with Matt Looney, where I said, I don't know how this stuff works. Can you explain it? And he's like, yeah, I don't know how exciting it will be. And I was like, we'll go with it anyway. And it turned into one of the most exciting shows that I think we've done this year. So let's start out with the basics. How does 2D sonar work? The thing that has been around that most of us grow up with. We'll pass the flashers, we'll pass the paper graphs, we'll say, we'll leave that to David Fritz in the 1980s and early 90s, and we'll start with something that's on everybody's boat, regardless of the new technology, is that 2D sonar. In layman's terms, is it even possible to describe how that functions regardless of what brand it is?
Yes, and I'll do it this way right here. And this is actually a general statement across all sonar, and we can dive deeper into each one to get more detail, but all sonar is this right here. I'm the transducer, so I'm what's mounted on the boat, glued inside in the hull, hanging off the back, and I'm sending out a signal. And so this would be the same as me saying, hey, Matt, what are you wearing right now? Describe what you're wearing. And you'd say, oh, I'm wearing a hat. I'm wearing a BTL hoodie. And I say, cool, you're wearing a hat and a BTL hoodie. You're about, however tall you are. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to write that down. That notepad where that got written down is your graph. So the signal I sent was me asking you the question. And then the return I get is me translating what you're telling me and then writing it down on the graph. Now, that is very, very much layman terms because we're talking about frequencies, but that's layman terms. That's all a transducer is doing. It's sending a signal, waiting to hear back. The echo is what it's called. And then it's displaying it on the graph. That's all sonar is.
So when you hear the clicking, that is the signal that it is shooting out. And what is it? Is it a sound wave?
Essentially, that's it. It's the pulse. It's the timing of the pulse. And so that's a frequency. Every time that click happens, there's a pulse going out. Now, depending on what sonar it is, it may be multiple pulses going out at that time, but that's all it is. It's just the pulse being initiated, if you will.
Okay. And then what it's hitting is then creating a data point.
Yeah, it's creating an echo.
Okay.
So now we're kind of going to get into what data we're hitting. It is a data point, but it's taking multiple data points. So if you've got a log that is, or, just say a perfectly square rock, I'm sending a signal out. I'll see if I can do it this way. I'm sending a signal out, and some of the signal is going to hit here. Some of it's going to go past, on either side of it. And so this part is actually going to start returning faster before this signal went out here, hit something, and came back. And so when I come
pointing
back
to his palm, he's pointing above it for those on iTunes, whereas it's a signal, but his palm is the rock. So as it hits the rock, it's creating a return quicker than the signal that's going above it. That is what then shows,
correct.
Oh, there's a rock on the bottom.
Correct. Because when I hit something, it's going to it's basically on its return journey. It's coming back to the transducer. The signal that missed it is going to go till it hits something. And so that's how it's going to paint that picture out there. Is every time it hits something, it's going to start coming back. All those data points to use your term is going to start being translated by the graph. The transducer is just receiving raw data. The graph is what's actually translating it.
Okay. And then it also obviously can determine the density of it, which is, and that's just based on how quickly you get the return. Like you get a quicker feedback from a harder bottom.
So let's say that you've got a rock versus a tree that's been under the water for 10 years. That rock is going to be much harder. So when that signal hits it, it's going to bounce faster and more immediate. It's going to, closer to the surface. It's not going to penetrate that rock as deeply before it starts its return journey. The log, or say grass, is going to absorb more of that signal. So you're going to get a more faint return because not as much of the signal is coming back to the transducer to be, available for the chart plotter.
Okay. And then one of the things that I've always been told is when you are reading your graph on 2D, you only want to focus on like a quarter inch of the right-hand side of the screen as it scrolls, because the rest of the data is morphed or it's behind you, or what is the deal with that on how let's say you've got a return, why you're getting your return, but what is the best way to read a 2D screen when you're scanning the bottom?
So 2D is coming down in a cone, in a conical shape. And so as the fish enters, you're going to start getting the leading edge. We've heard the arches. Everybody who's read a 2D sees arches. Those arches are essentially swim bladders of the fish. And so as it comes into the cone, you're going to start the leading edge. And then when it's dead center of the cone, that's the top of that arch. And then as it trails out, it's going to start trailing off again, thus creating the arch. Now, as I'm moving along, the right side of my screen is where the transducer was, and that's the most recent data. And so that is right now, when you're at the peak of that arch, is right at the right-hand side of your screen. You're as directly above that fish as you're going to be. Now, there's a caveat to that, because as you're driving, say you're graphing around, idling around, that's historical data. By the time you're on top of that arch, depending on how you set your scroll speed, ping speed, everything, that fish may be, 10, 15, even 20 feet behind you. And so we can get into that in a minute and talking about live sonar. That's but we won't get there yet.
But that's the thing. So when you used to drop shot just using 2D, it seemed, and I've done this a couple of times. I actually did it on Hartwell in one of the national championships. You'd go over the fish and it'd be arches. That's because you're moving, you're getting a little bit of a feedback, so that fish is past you. What's creating the arches, just the very peak of it where you're hitting it. When you drop the trolling motor and you get over them, they look like lasagna. Yeah, those are the same fish that are arches while you're moving, but because they are staying under the transducer in the middle of the cone, they are not creating that arch shape.
Correct. The arch is created by them entering the cone, because think about a cone, and I know your listeners won't see this, but I'm creating a 45. There's different beam widths, but as I come into the cone, I'm gonna this cone is angled. And so I'm going to start, and that's where that arch comes in. And then as I leave the cone, as it's trailing out, boom, I'm going to come back down. So when I'm just sitting still, I'm shooting straight down. You're in the dead center of the cone. I can see the the fish, like you said, look like lasagna. They're flat. But the arch is created by the conical effect, them entering, being dead center, and then leaving. That's how we get the actual arch.
Okay. And if you're not moving, but the fish is, you'll see an arch up front then.
You could see an arch. What you're typically going to see is you start seeing those streaks. That's on the old 2D. That's how we'd see active fish, right? You'd see that streaking fish. And
They're
that's
streaking.
They're streaking. They are. We're looking.
I remember that used to be a thing.
That absolutely was a thing. That's how we would tell the feeding the active fish in the school was we would go through. Okay, arch. Oh, look, there's one that's active. Boom, that's the one I'm after. There are some active fish.
Okay. Is there still a place in bass fishing for just straight up old school, well-read 2D sonar, or is that going to become a thing of the past?
It might at some point, but right now, when you've got your down and side imaging, which is really good, even your forward-facing sonar, where they still struggle, excuse me, is when those fish lock and put their bellies in the mud. When they lock on the bottom, 2D sonar still absolutely, in my opinion and my experience, is you still get better, fish identification. And even when you're out, just graphing around, 2D still shows fish better than your side imaging does, or your down imaging. A lot of time you'll see dots and you say, oh, those are fish on your high definition stuff. Where on your 2D you get that arch, and so 2D definitely has a place, and you start drop shotting in really deep water. As I know you're a drop shotter, you like that. I do too, by the way. To be fair, but 2D can still play. I run my forward facing sonar and 2D at the same time. With a map. That's my setup up front, because I'm always wanting to know what's going on. But you just have to remember, if you get to chasing a fish, by the time you see it on 2D, it's done behind you. If I'm on the trolling motor and I see my 2D, by the time I see that fish, he's probably at the back of the boat already. Okay. And that's where the forward-facing sonar comes to, full tilt.
And we're going to kind of run through the three things here. We're going to move on to side and down imaging now. But I also want to make sure, and we're going to open this up to questions and answers. I see Steve there, question about looking at shell beds. We're going to kind of run through it all. Then we're going to go back. We're going to take a couple of calls. We're going to take questions from the instant feedback. But let me see if I've got this right. I don't know if I did. When it comes to settings, whether you run a Lowrance, a Garmin, a Humminbird, or whatever, I kind of want to do the show to where you understand kind of what you're looking at, and it seems based on the conditions, how you're fishing, what you're looking for, how your stuff is set up, what units you have, that's going to kind of vary from there to there. Right. So there's not a universal answer for, I've got an HDS Live 12, what do my settings need to be for this? Like, there's going to be little tweaks for that. But my goal here, instead of that, which is better to get someone in the boat or to do the YouTube searches to look at what's on the bass tank for dirty water, deep water, clean water, what you're trying to find, fish versus bottom, to get an overview, general understanding of how these things work individually, and then how you can put them together so that you have a system of finding, identifying, and catching fish. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and as a general rule, every time I get on a new body of water that I'm going to try to break down, without going, no matter what unit I'm running, because we try to test, all units. The thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, and each one calls it a little different. So these are generic statements, but I'm going to look at my sensitivity, my contrast, my brightness, and color palette is a huge factor that people overlook. They get locked into, man, this one looks good. Well, that color palette may not give you the best image when I'm looking for a grass line compared to, looking for a shell bed. And then the other one that's overlooked is ping and scroll speed. Those are the settings that I'm going to go adjust based on what I'm trying to do. Not all boats idle at the same speed. And so you need to make sure to match that as well, so your images aren't skewed. You get that good detailed image. But I'm going to do that every time I get on a body of water. Take 15 minutes. I mean, a lot of coves where you put in the ramp, you've got to idle out anyway. Well, go ahead and start playing with your graph to set it up then. So when you get on the water, you can make minor tweaks, but you can fish.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into the side and down imaging. Layman's terms, basics, regardless of brand. how the heck am I able to see 100 feet on either side of the boat? And then what's the difference between my 2D and the down imaging?
Okay, so your down image. Let's start with down imaging compared
Let's
to 2D.
do that.
Instead of being a very specific cone, it's more of a slice. Okay, and it's a higher frequency. And frequency is, in layman's terms, just how fast something happens. And so, think of if you get a TV and it says, hey, this is 120 hertz, this is 240 hertz. That's just a refresh rate. How quickly does it update? So when I'm down imaging, I'm going to run in anywhere from 455, 800 megahertz ranges.
Do we need to know what that means? I don't know what that means.
It just happens really fast.
Okay, so it just means it's fast.
Right. So the higher the frequency, the faster it happens. The lower the frequency.
So that's why I've got all these different options on there. When I say, what frequency do I run it with? I don't know. Let's just pick one in the middle and hope it's the right one.
Exactly. And
I'm just telling you, Scott, this is how the average guy whose brain doesn't understand it works, at least mine.
Exactly. And because we're running higher frequencies, so we need to pause right here and make this statement so people understand sonar and frequency waves, how it moves through water and in general. And the best way that I have figured out to explain this is a low frequency is better for deep water. The deeper the water, the lower the frequency, the better return you're going to get. The higher frequency, the better detail you're going to get, but higher frequencies do not travel as far. Now, think about it like this. If you've ever pulled up to a stoplight and you hear the car next to you sitting there we called it bumping, you can hear the bass thumping in that car. Exactly. You can't hear the words to the song, but you can hear the bass. Well, bass is a low frequency. It's going to be low, it's going to be slow, and it's going to travel a long distance. So that's where my lower frequency ranges on my sonar comes into play. If I get in that same car, I may not hear that bass in the same manner, but I'm going to hear the words. That words are spoken at a higher frequency, but there's more detail in them, right? Words are detail.
Mm-hmm.
So translate that to sonar. My higher frequency is going to give me better detail, but I just can't hear them or translate them as much as
it's a whale call, dude. It's like the whale call. Because if you watch National Geographic, they've got the down there in the ocean, but then when you get up around them and they're interacting, it's a higher pitch.
Yeah,
is that the exact?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what it is. The whales
I'm gonna go watch a bunch of stuff on humpback whales after this.
To be honest, where do you think sonar came from? It came from studying animals and dolphins, echolocation. That's all we're doing. We're echolocating our structure and our cover, our fish.
Okay.
All
right. So back to down imaging then. Sorry. I like, seriously, I'll get off on these side tangents. We'll talk about whales for 10 minutes. There'll be someone there going, man, I was just starting to understand down imaging.
Yeah. So your down imaging, if you're in say 20 feet of water or less, even up to 30 feet, you can run your frequency much higher, run it up high. But where we're going to start seeing dots as opposed to arches is because we're taking slices instead of a cone.
What do you mean by a slice? I don't understand the slice.
So standing on the back of your boat on the transom looking straight down, instead of looking down and seeing a cone like I would with 2D, it's going to be more of a just literally slice. A meat slicer. It's just a lot of...
Okay, one second. I'm going to show you a picture for this. This is 2D.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what you're saying is I'm going to draw the water line. I'm going to draw a fancy boat. Frank is going to fire me after this. Scalish is going to be very disappointed. So whereas the 2D is more of a cone, the down imaging is more like that.
That's correct. If you're looking vertically, that's correct.
Yes.
Now, if you're looking at that from the back of the boat, there is still
right.
Think of it like a pizza slice. Maybe that helps. Do you like pizza?
Okay.
Pizza slice. It's very thin, but there is still a cone out there. But we're coming through it straight on, not from the side.
Okay.
So, the 2D is an ice cream cone. 2D or down imaging is a pizza slice.
Very similar, but you have more detail and it looks more like the actual bottom, and you can see the little variations because you're running it at a higher rate and you're getting way more returns on it.
Yeah, that's exactly
okay.
right. You're getting a
Fair
lot more
sense.
data points.
Okay, now this is the one that blows my mind, the side imaging. Like, this is some like NASA stuff here to where you can, I mean, literally, I mean, that's what they use it for. I remember when it first came out, a little gruesome, but guys who had the early side imagings would get called to look for cars and bodies in the water.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is a very good use of it. You know,
and a lot of the police departments and boats and stuff had that stuff before it was even being utilized in fishing. Now, granted, I believe the transducers were much bigger and had to be like towed behind the boat and stuff, but the same principle. But how do you take something that's the size of a Subway sandwich or smaller and see 100 feet on either side of the boat?
So it's very similar to the 2D. We're just angling the transducer. I mean, the element inside there. I mean, it's essentially, you know, the same thing. We're just at that point just angling it to shoot to the side. So it's the same type of element, same type of frequencies. We're literally just pointing in a different direction. Now the gotcha is where I can really nerd out, and I won't, but the software to translate it, because when I turn it at an angle, there's going to be a part of the bottom that just naturally, if there was nothing back there, it was all the same flat parking lot, it would come back sooner and it would give me a really weird image. So that's why you see closer to the boat, it's a little bit brighter. You know, you can actually wash it out, right? And as it gets further out, it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer because I'm getting less return, and my angles are a little bit different.
So that's why when you want more detail, like let's say you are going over a shell bed and you've marked it and you want to see it, you can go back, and if you have it set at 120 on either side, you get a better, clearer picture if you bring it into 60 or 40 on either side. Correct. Because there's the same amount of I'm going to say it wrong. The same amount of data, but it's compressed in a smaller area, so you get more detail with it. Instead of it trying to grab things from way out there, it's grabbing the same amount just from a lot smaller area.
And it also comes down to your screen as well, you know, your graph that you're translating this on. Because even if you're ranged out to 200 feet or 5 feet, the transducer is in a fixed position. It's going to shoot as far as it's going to shoot. Right. So when I change the range, I'm not changing the angle inside the transducer. It's fixed. So I'm just showing what I'm translating. You know, show me the zoom, if you will, when I'm ranging it out. And so we come down to pixelation and everything else on the graph. The graph is only capable of producing X amount of resolution. And physically, there's only so much room on the graph for all this to put in. So let's say there's a laydown out there that's 10 foot long. Well, it's going to naturally look different at 120 feet than if you just, even with your eyes, than it would if you walked up to it at 20 feet. Right. Bigger. And so that's basically what's happening is you're just zooming that. You're saying, okay, let me take this field and show me what's in this, as opposed to this field and put it on a screen that's this size.
Perfect. All right, let's take one question here, and then let's go on and get the forward-facing sonar. We'll take our last break, then we'll come back. We'll get to what everyone's here, which is picking your brain with questions.
Okay.
Good question here by Nate. Is the black space under the boat on side imaging a straight down view, or does it span out at an angle like a cone?
Okay, so on my side imaging, I've got the white line in the center. That is the center line of the boat, if you will. It's actually the center line of the transducer, but we'll call it the center line of the boat. The black space there is actually the water column. So if you actually looked on the left and on the right, where the first place you see the bottom, what first place you pick up the bottom, that is actually, if you stitch those two images together, that is actually what you're seeing. So people think like, oh, it's a dead cone or whatever. That's not true. It's actually the water column. So let's say I've got my down imaging and my side imaging up at the same time. If I went over and saw a school of fish in my down imaging, the same fish will show up in that black space on my side imaging. I hope that makes sense.
Hold on, I'm doing some origami over here. This is how I helped to understand what the heck I was looking at. I've never actually cleared this with you, but I hope it's right. All right.
That's fine.
There's no way to...
So something of note, the next time someone goes out and looks at their side imaging, to help understand this, that black space is just the water column if you go look at your depth, so let's say I'm out in 20 feet of water, on my graph is telling me I'm in 20 feet of water. If you look at the range, the numbers on the bottom of your screen, at 20 feet is where your first picture is actually going to be, showing up on your side imaging. So if you're ranged out there to 120 feet and you're in 20 feet of water, you're actually only seeing 100 feet to the side of the boat. And that's an epiphany moment, if you will. I don't have to display my depth to know what depth I'm in, because I can just look at my side imaging and say, 20 feet out is where I'm getting my first return. I'm in roughly 20 foot of water. So show me the origami. Let's see it.
All right. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Okay. You take a piece of paper, right?
Yep.
And unfortunately you can see through here, but I've got a center line. I'm folding it in half. That is the center line of my transducer.
Yep.
I've got a squiggly lines on either side that are roughly, that is what I call the black space.
Okay.
That's the dark space. Then an X on either side of the paper.
Yep.
So I'm going to now make a 3-dimensional model. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold it back so you actually have a deal that's like this.
Correct.
That is what you are seeing when you are side imaging, and this vertical space, if it had been 40 foot deep, it would be, if it, instead of 20 foot deep, I could make it a lot deeper to where then, it looks like that.
Correct. And so if you take the sides of your paper and pull it out just a hair, so this is what we actually see. And your angled spot, that triangle area is what we're seeing as the black space.
Yep.
But then what it actually is representing is it's making it a 2-dimensional for us. But if you actually push that paper together right there, and so now push that triangle together. So now those bottoms are touching. That's actually what that is representing. So what I see on the left is actually would stitch right to what I see on the right. That black space is just overlaying the down imaging in that same picture.
Have you ever seen that? You've seen that done
I have,
before,
and that's a very good representation. The only thing I don't like about that representation is that sometimes people think that that's a cone, that's basically a dead spot in my imaging. And it's like, no, you've got to stitch them together. That is a good representation of physically what we're seeing, but the two pieces of paper need to be pushed together, to complete that in layman's terms.
Yeah.
To make it, so.
But I mean, technically, you could take a screenshot of your side imaging on your graph, print it out in color, and do this exact same thing, and then be like, okay, take one where you've got some logs on one side and rocks on the other, something that you kind of know what's on the bottom there. Print that out, and if you're under 18, ask your parents, because printer cartridges are pretty expensive, and that's probably going to be a lot of black and amber ink. And then you can I just did that, and it was the only way that I was like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, that is a very good representation of it, because when I start talking about stitching, I get accused of getting off in the weeds and basically nerding out, and I apologize if that happens.
It's all good. I'll try to keep you for us simpletons.
Yeah, corral me if I get too far off in the weeds, because it will absolutely happen. But when I start talking about stitching the bottom together, that's where I lose some people. I see that blank stare, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to talk over anybody. I want people to understand it. I mean, that's how we started the Bass Tank. Is we wanted to teach people how to use electronics. These things are expensive. We wanted people to be able to use them and go catch fish. So when I get to talking, I get excited. I'm like, oh, look, here it is. So I'm just trying to share it. But yeah, that's
what Nate says. He says, yeah, that makes sense. If I idle directly over a rock, I see it on both the left and the right side of the image because it's straight down.
Exactly. And he would be able to see that on his down imaging at the same time that he sees it on left and right. He would see it at the same time.
Yeah. And then if you made that representation, you would see the rock would be like split directly on where you're.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
All right. We're like I said, we could do 2 hours on each one of these. Yeah. I wanted to get just a basic overview and then answer some questions. All right. Forward-facing sonar. We got all three major brands with forward-facing sonar out there now. This is just a basic rundown on how that sucker works and how we can see in front of the boat now in live time.
Yeah. So this is a big one. Obviously, it's wildly popular. I love it. But essentially, we're still just taking a sonar signal And there's a lot of proprietary information behind the scenes of each manufacturer they're not going to share with us, and that's fine. But basically, what it boils down to is we're just sending a lot of signals, and we're you can see stitching and things like that where they're basically making a composite. But basically, it's just a lot of signals very fast, and we're getting those returns. But it's updating it so fast, we're seeing it swim around. See those fish move instead of being historical. We're seeing them literally move. The same thing with our bait. As far as the inner workings and the frequencies they're truly running at, we can go look at the published data, and is that really true? I don't know that it is, because it's probably partly true. That's a yes, they're running in that frequency, but how often or how many elements are that? What is the offset of each element? Because you can't just send one signal out and get the return that you want, because you got to have something. Again, we just talked about that in sonar. When I hit an object, it's going to start returning. Well, I've got to have another beam going around that and coming back in almost the same time to let you know, hey, I hit it here, and then he was here. Oh, and then he was here.
So that's why there's three. That's why it's like a staggered. Is
Not
that why
exactly.
they're
No?
Okay,
not,
I was wrong.
because that is the angles of the water column itself.
Okay.
One of them is shooting up and to the top. One's kind of shooting mid range.
Sorry, I got you off track.
Yeah, one's shooting down and behind. But and then they're probably like there's offsets and there's ways that they're interlacing. Yeah, it's just amazing. So I could.
But it is that much more difficult. That's what I'm saying. So like the side and down and 2D and flat, all that's been like, it's like dialed in, it's optimized. Yeah. But this forward facing is that much more difficult. Cause I mean, it's not like one day, whatever, they came and like, it'd be cool if we'd see in front. I mean, I'm sure they've been working on this stuff for years and years and years and years and years and tried to figure it out, but it is that much more difficult to see in front in quote unquote real time than it is to the sides and down relying on the historical data.
Correct. That's exactly right. It's just amazing. A little side note is I actually told somebody one time, I said, if I had one wish, it would be for one day I could go to any body of water and I could literally see under the water, see what every fish is doing, like legitimately see what they're doing. And I should have wished for like $1 billion, I guess, because it was a couple years later when, forward facing sonar was introduced. And I'm like, my wish came true. I wish for all the wrong stuff, I guess, in world hunger. That's what I should have been wishing instead. But yeah, no, it is. And it's cutting edge. It's going to get better. Think about when side imaging and down imaging came out. Our minds were blown. We said, wow, what are they going to come up with next? 10 years, give or take later, we've got forward facing sonar. So right now we're sitting there saying, this is amazing. It's still being refined. And you say, what are they going to come up with next? And there's going to be a point, Matt, probably in our lifetime, where we say, dude, you remember when that forward-facing sonar came out? That's so yesterday.
We could only see 4 degrees.
Exactly. What in the world? That it's not. That's only a 4-pounder. I'm not chasing. Where's my 6-pounder?
Hey, let's do a real quick diagram of what you're seeing. We've done it with the side imaging. We've done it with the down imaging. We've done it with the 2D. Let's do just a real quick and see if I can Picasso this just to bring things full circle. So we have a water. We have a boat on the water. We have your trolling motor in the water. We have a transducer there. Now, what lines am I going to be drawing here?
Okay, so generally speaking, we are, if we can look from the top of the boat. Are we looking on the side? I don't know where we're at in the Picasso. Are we from a side view here?
This looks like a.
I'm enjoying your art. I mean, this is fantastic.
Okay, so there's the boat. There's the water.
Okay.
The circle is the forward-facing transducer.
Okay, fantastic.
Where the squiggly lines is where we're wanting to look.
Okay, all right. So draw me.
These will be for sale in the store afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to autograph them, right? I mean, you got to sign your artwork. That's.
I'll send it to you to autograph it.
Yeah, fair enough. It'll be the special, BTL special. So draw me a pizza slice with the point of that pizza slice being at the transducer.
Like so.
Okay. So now repeat that, circling all the way back around directly underneath the transducer. And then you could draw one more that's looking behind it, which is going to depend on depth. Yeah. So we're range. Give me a range here. Let's pretend that's 20 feet out. But yes,
Okay.
that's what our beams look like, because we're going to have multiple elements inside, inside there to make this image up. We can't have just one complete, element that's sending out one signal. I'm going to have a bunch of elements in there that are sending out their signal, because they're going to fire at different times and everything else to create that image. And so it's a timing deal.
I just totally messed up my focus.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was.
No, you're fine, but it's not me. It's because, see, like I went, ooh, that close. I think if I do it real slowly, there we go. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and again, we're looking at a slice. We're looking at a very small angle. And now you can do the math on it on published data and say, okay, 18, 10, 20 degrees. That's all published data. And you can do the math and say, okay, at 60 feet, it's this wide. Well, the thing about it is the way this sonar works is, even though you can see and actually pick something up out there at 60 feet and the beam is going to be X wide, the way the signals are working, there's a sweet spot on these transducers. And depending, you just raise your hand and tell me to stop if I get too far in the weeds.
No, this is good.
Oh, sorry, my computer just turned off, but I'm back.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I can see you. When you see a target out there and it's like glowing, it's like really intense, I am on that sweet spot. I can put a bait directly on that fish's nose. And when my bait is coming back and it's glowing at the same intensity, I am literally in the same beam. Now, if I throw out there and my bait is a little bit of a shadow, I can see it, but it's not quite as intense. I'm missing that fish. I'm in the beam because of the width, at distance, but I'm not at the same intensity. Now, that fish may come to it, but if I'm trying to put it on its nose and make him react, I've missed my
You know what I call that? I call that cracking the Easter egg. Because that thing looks like an Easter egg out there glowing, and when your bait's glowing and it goes right through it, boom, you crack the Easter egg. You get the candy inside.
That's exactly right. And so the other thing is, depending on which brand you're running, the beam angles, there's a point where they transition to a different beam, right? As I show that picture, I could divide that into three. So there's one that's up the top, there's one mid, and then there's one down. So as it's coming through, as the bait or fish is tracking, every now and again you see it jump, and people say, why is it jumping up 2 feet? It's the way you're hitting it, with the transducer, and it may be boat positioning, maybe wind. I mean, there's a lot of factors in the way we're hitting that fish, because very rarely do we get those perfectly calm days where I can take my foot off the trolling motor, I can point it at a fish, make my cast, and bring it straight back in.
Yeah, and those are the days I used to call in sick to BTL. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And that's the other thing. One of the big mistakes I see people make when trying to teach them live scope is they want to point the transducer, and then they say, okay, take the foot off the trolling motor and then make a cast. It's like, no, we have to stay on. We have to position, and making a premature cast where the boat is drifting in a certain direction, or the wind is pushing them. They're tracking away from the fish, or the fish is swimming. And get the boat, stay on that fish, but get the boat in a position where you can make a cast on that fish. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can't catch a fish that's off to the side or back behind, because we've done it. But especially when you're learning early on, is be patient, get the boat in position, make your cast, and you're going to make more accurate casts. You're going to catch more fish that way. But don't take your foot off the trolling motor, because as you're coming back, you're going to be crossing beams. And again, it doesn't matter what manufacturer it is. There's an offset, there's an angle to it, and you're going to cross that. And so you're kind of constantly be following that bait as it's coming back in, as it's tracking back in.
That makes sense. To me, that's kind of like when you find one and then take your foot off. It's kind of like going to the golf course, going up on the tee box, putting the ball on the tee, and then never swinging the club. Yeah. And you're like, well, I'm at the hole, I'm at the golf. Dude, that's just step one. You've got 5 more swings before the ball's in the hole.
That's exactly right. It is very active when we're chasing fish. We're targeting fish with using forward-facing sonar. It is a very active process. That's the thing about it. It's there's a lot of guys that like to put it on a pole, and that's totally fine. That doesn't fit my style of fishing ever, because my foot never leaves a trolling motor. The only time I ever go into any type of use my trolling motor in a spot lock or anything like that is when I'm retying or I'm putting a fish in the live well. Other than that, my foot is on the trolling motor nonstop. Now, the crappie guys, that's a little different. That's a whole different world. And it's been interesting when forward-facing sonar first came out, the crappie guys were, well, I went on a pole. I don't know how to use my trolling motor. And that's not a shot at the crappie guys at all. So please don't take it that way. That's just not how they were used to doing it. They would drag, they would dip, so they might go on the trolling motor, but it was more of just a move from tree to tree and dipping, or they would use their, spider rigging and just kind of go in straight lines. And so it was an adaptation. They had to adapt to using the trolling motor more like us bass guys do. And they've done a great job of it, so it's been really cool to see that evolution. I know we're on BTL, but I gotta give my crappie guys a shout out too. So
I've caught a lot more bass because I crappie fish. 100% believe that. Bunch of guys will tell you that.
That's a good point right there. If you want to get good with your forward-facing sonar, don't go bass fishing when you first get it. Go catch crappie. Spend a couple of weeks and go catch some crappie. A month, go catch crappie. It will teach you you're not necessarily learning fish behavior because it's crappie versus bass. However, it is teaching you target versus bait relation, boat positioning, things like that. That's a big one. That's one of the first things. I'm not going to tell you a certain guy. I mean, look what John did. He went and fished the crappie tour before he went to the pro side of bass fishing, and that should tell you something there. He had success. Now, John, you just know John well enough to know that he just catches fish, but I'm pretty sure that guy, you could tell him, hey, John, there's fish in this lake. I'm not going to tell you what species it is, but there's fish here. No information, just go put him out there, and he'll be like, you know what? I figured out that there's walleye, catfish, bass, largemouth, smallmouth spots. And I'm like, what? How did you know that? But he would just go do it.
It's crazy. You feel like we sufficiently covered all 3 of those, and we can come back, take some questions?
I mean, listen, we can spend.
That's why I said we could do a week on each one of these things, but just listen. I want to. I don't do this often. I want to shamelessly plug something, and I know the all the bass tank guys for the past years or whatever. There's been this rod that's been years in the making, COVID, everything, and they finally are in, and it's the crappie tank rod. It's the bass tank, but they're calling it the crappie tank rod, and it's through Denali. And if you want to learn the live scoping and seeing how it's done, there's a lot of videos about this now. Like when John taught me this, I'm like, how many guys are doing it like this, like with the live scope and the long rod and stuff? And he's like, maybe 20. And I'm like, where? And he's like, in the world. And it's like normal to all of us here, but if you have the forward-facing technology and you want to learn crappie behavior. Now, listen, it sucks for the first month. I will be the first to say it. You will be extremely frustrated. You will feel like you're wasting your time. You will go out multiple times and you will not catch fish. The only reason I say with it was I saw the power of it and what John was able to do. I was able to see him with the crappie go, there's a crappie that's 20 feet in front of the boat, take a 12 or 14-foot rod with a crappie jig on it, drop the jig down to where you can see it on the crappie's nose, watch that fish react to it. Then I went out and did it myself, and you're talking about putting your foot on the trolling motor, you're talking about boat positioning and wind, fish reaction, distance, understanding what you're looking at. If you can get that down, I cannot tell you, and I'm speaking from experience here, if you are just getting into the forward fish, I cannot tell you how easy it is then in a bass tournament to take a drop shot and cast to a brush pile that is not moving 40 to 60 feet in front of you and know that you're putting your bait in front of a fish. That is because of multiple 4-letter words that were yelled at crappie on windy days with a 12-foot rod trying to drop a 16th-ounce jig in front of them. I say that to say you have to have the right rod to do this if you want to get into it. You don't need 10 of them. You don't need 5 of them. You don't need 3 of them. You need 1 of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is the 12-foot jigging rod from the Crappie tank that it just became available on DenaliRods.com. It's $159 retail. You'll have it for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's a 2-piece. You put a bait caster on it, and you're good to go on that. Like literally,
Absolutely.
I have 2 rods, and that's the only crappie rods that I have in a little box, and they stay in the corner of the boat.
Yeah. We got to see it, at ICAST last year. I was fortunate enough to get to attend and saw the rods, the final production rods there at ICAST, and so that was really exciting to walk by and see this thing that we've been working on to be finally fruition has come up there.
Yes.
So,
they do a 14, a 12, a 10, but my suggestion would be spend the 159. It's got the backbone where you can swing them, a soft enough tip. It's light. This is not like your trolling rod. It's not a wimpy rod. That doesn't work. This is like the hyacinth punching rod of crappie fishing. Like it's got, you know what I mean? But you're good on it. You can learn with it. You know you're using the right stuff. And so that's my suggestion. Like I said, they were just available. I've been trying to, for the last 6 months, I'm like, are they up there yet? Are they up there yet? But I talk about crappie fishing a lot, how much it helps my bass fishing.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, and so, the 14 rod, they can move up to that. The 12 foot's a good all around long rod to get, because there's a balance factor there as well. And, but I think if someone buys a 12 foot, they're going to learn it, and then they're going to want the 14 foot as well.
Yeah, I get more hog tied with the 14 foot, end up with it in the seats.
Listen, the first time I used one long rods, so John's been out here honing this skill. I'll tell something off of my, I'll tell a little story on me. I see the fish, and John's like, that's a good fish. I'm like, yeah, that's a good fish. And I set the hook. Well, John is, 18 feet tall, and I'm just shy of 6 foot. I'm just average height, whatever. So when John sets a hook, it just naturally, everything continues going vertical because it's just going to come out of the water. But when you've got a 12-foot rod, you've got to kind of, continue on. And I get this fish to the surface, and I run out of room to continue taking him up, to swinging him. And it was probably the only time that I can legitimately say it was a 3-pounder, and it may not have been. It may have been 296. It was right there at that. And, dude, I get him up to the surface, and then I'm like, oh, no, what do I do? And I see this crappie go whop, whop, whop. Away he goes. And the rest of the day, John kept saying, man, that was a good fish. And if I can get John to say that, I kind of validate myself that was probably a pretty good fish. And I was still early enough in the crappie world to say, I don't know if it was or not. But
that's, I think, the third time I went with Dylan Hackler and John. And they were like, your goal is to catch a 2-pounder. Yeah. And my first 2-pounder was a 276 that I boat flipped. And I just remember this thing, I watched them, and it's, and you set the hook and you just keep coming with it. And that thing just comes flying through the air like a potato chip. And it's massive because you've got this 12, 14-foot rod that looks like a pool cue with a tip. And, man, this thing flew past me into the bottom of the boat. And I was like, that's the biggest crop I've ever seen in my life.
Exactly.
It was at 276. So, hey, we're going to take a break. Like I said, we could go all day here, but we have a lot of questions that are already kind of piling up on the instant feedback. We'll run some commercials, come back, hit it up with Scott Palmer, the mad scientist from the Bass Tank on BTL on a Wednesday.
I've made my living on the water for over 20 years.
For 14 years.
For over 23 years.
I've worn a bunch of different clothing brands over the years.
Some companies big.
And some companies small.
All of them said they were making clothing for us. But none of them knew us.
None of them were us.
Except for one.
Except for one.
Except one.
AFCO.
AFCO.
AFCO. AFCO.
Fishing isn't part of us. It is us.
The KVD 100 jerkbait. 15 different colors. A perfect combination of roll, wiggle, and flash. Increased castability. 3D eyes. Premium black nickel hooks. KVD. Tie one on. Striking lures.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute of every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
Vibrating jigs are a great choice for any time of year, and the Kamikaze Swim-On is a perfect match for any vibrating jig. Two sizes and the unique tail design gives it a bait fish profile and a great swimming action for realism. There are 17 colors. See them all at bigbitebaits.com. The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
Welcome back to BTL on a Wednesday, talking with Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. Kind of spent the last half hour overviewing the very basics of how 2D sonar work, down imaging, side imaging, and the ever-popular forward-facing sonar. Now we're going to go to the instant feedback to get some general questions. Over the past 3 years, Scott, how many questions about sonar and technology would you care to guess you have fielded from the phone, from people in person, from text, emails, calls? I mean, it's got to be in the tens of thousands, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That I could feel pretty confident saying that it's in the tens of thousands, and it may be closer, honestly, at this point to the 100,000 range. It's probably not quite there, but might hit it by the end of the year, and that's okay. That's literally okay. That's why we started the Bass Tank. We're here for education. Yes, we're trying to run a business. No, not trying to hide that at all, but we're trying to educate people.
All right, let's do some rapid fire questions then. Let's hit like 8 or 10 of them real quick.
All right, let's see what we can get done.
Is there
here
a quick answer in technology?
and I'll do my best.
Let's try to do it. All right.
Okay.
Nick wants to know. I don't know who Brad is, but ask Brad how far off we are to having 360 live. I have a feeling that is where we are headed, but would love to hear your thoughts on 360 live.
I think I can't say because I honestly don't know, but I think you're right thinking that at some point someone's going to have that. Just take the landscape mode, perspective mode, scout mode already. That's kind of a iteration of that already. That's 135 degrees. I mean, basically at this point, we've just got to add a few more transducers and we can get 360 degrees worth of live coverage. You could do it right now, but it would cost you some money because you would have to have, almost, not quite 4 transducers. You'd have some overlay, and you could put them on a couple graphs,
I see what you're doing.
You see what I'm saying there, but
I see what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just saying you could, but is it feasible? What's probably going to be limited to is the size of the transducers. I think that's probably it because you can't you can't have something that's static and rotating because that's not live. It's not historical, but it is historical. It's not quite live, but it's not quite historical. It's in that weird. So we're not far, but I think we're going to be reduced. The issue is probably transducer size and what that looks like. But yeah, at some point.
Steve says he's got a Helix 7, the tiny little bright dots with down imaging, gold clusters, he calls them.
So this is one of those, I'll answer it the best I can without seeing it. It's going to be hard for me to say, but is it, the question I would ask is it in the same spot on the down imaging at all times? Or does it appear sometimes, is it just completely across the entire screen? Or is it, hey, it's only in 10 foot of water? Is it when I'm in 5 foot of water, it doesn't show up, so it's hidden? Because it could actually be something, pixelation in the screen itself. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but the screen itself could beginning to have some issues, in the LCD side of things. So I'm not trying to sidestep that one. I just really don't have enough information. I'd have to see a picture of it.
All right. Question about, this is something that I think hasn't really taken off as much as I thought it would when they announced it, but it's, what is Lawrence says, the scout mode and then perspective mode with the live scope, where it's a much broader view of those. What is his question? What are the best settings for that? Is that it just I have not seen that used nearly as much as I think a lot of us thought it would when it was introduced by either company.
Yeah, and so those two modes are basically taking that narrow beam I was talking about, but it's 135 degrees. Remember the pizza slice you just drew for me?
Yeah.
And turning it sideways. And then we've got a certain angle as it's looking out there. So it's not just flat, because I would just be seeing the top of the water column. So they're angling it down. Well, then what that does is that creates some dead zones at the top and bottom of that, because I'm just taking a narrow section of it. So where that becomes applicable is in two places. If I'm in shallow water, and typically I use perspective mode springtime, when I'm in 10 foot of water, I'm going down the bank, just burning, throwing a spinnerbait, because I'm looking for those targets. Yes, I can absolutely see fish on perspective mode, but I'm actually looking for those targets where there's that rock or that cover that normally by the time you drive over it, you've spoke, and you see it, you've spooked the fish. Well, I'm trying to see that out there. Instead of throwing the targets I can see with my eyes, I'm catching that fish or that hitting that target, before I ever get there. So there's absolutely an application.
Living Missouri's Outdoor said, if you were to purchase one battery for live scope, what would you suggest?
So make sure I understand this correctly, just a dedicated live scope screen and live scope itself. And so then I'm going to go.
The only thing that's running off of it is your forward facing.
So I'm going to ask how long are you going to be on the water? But essentially do the time on the water. If I'm going to fish 10 hours, live scope is roughly 1.5 amps. Most graphs are going to be 1.5. I'm going to be conservative and say I'm going to have 2 amps per. So if I'm going to be on the water for 10 hours, I'm being conservative and saying 4 amps per draw, which is high. No, full disclosure. Multiply those together, I need a 40 amp hour battery. So I'm going to bump that up because I'm always going to go overkill 50 amp hours, and you're going to fish all day. So 50 amp hour Pro Guide makes an amazing lithium. Lithium is light. Lithium is light, and it makes it charges fast, and you get your full 50 amp hours out of it. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I just say, I know there was a question earlier about identifying shell beds on side imaging and what those look like, and the best settings possibly for identifying shell beds.
So there's two different ways to approach this. You can either approach it where I'm just looking for shell beds and I don't care about anything else. And what I want to do there is I want to run my sensitivity, my contrast. I want to run it down a little bit, because we're talking about a hard bottom amongst normally a sandy, a softer bottom. So I want that thing to kind of glow. Color palette is going to be a big factor here, because grass will show up differently than a shell bed would. And so depending on what it is, I use green emerald, kind of that black emerald. It's the black with the green when I'm looking for grass lines. And I will actually go to amber or, more of your copper tones when I'm looking for shell beds, because that white will really jump out there. And it's going to look like, your driveway. imagine what your gravel driveway would look like under the water. It's just going to be kind of speckled. It's kind of be like, oh, there it is. And it's going to look completely different than everything around. You may have a bunch of big chunk rock, or you're going to have, you know how it is. We live in Oklahoma. There's river systems here. You go find those shell beds, and it's going to look like exactly what you think of. Imagine it dry, and then that's what it's going to look like, but you're going to have these little shadows. So it's going to be kind of speckled.
It's going to look different.
It's going to look different. It's going to be obvious that, hey, this doesn't belong here. And
in Florida, it's like you said, bluegill beds.
Almost. Yeah, bluegill beds. Exactly. That's exactly right. And so then we're going to get that honeycomb effect, right? And you're going to just see them patterned out there. It's going to look like it does not belong. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that isolated item, that target that doesn't belong. It does not look like the rest of it, because that's where those fish like to come hang out and chew.
All right. I'm going to modify J-Rod's question, because he said, if a guy had $5,000 to spend, what would Scott do to upgrade his technology on his boat? That's a loaded question. You could go a million different directions based on that. So here's where I want to turn this to. Sorry, J-Rod. Is I want you to talk about something that, regardless of what you run, is an upgrade that is worth your money. And didn't you guys I just saw a thing on there. It's called like the sling or your cable upgrade on it isn't that something that universally, regardless of what unit you run, you will never regret putting on your vessel?
Exactly. We released the Bass Tank Power Harness. And this is something for everybody. This is something, when you come to our install shop, we've been doing from day one. That was when we first started this. I told John, I said, proper gauge wire is going to fix so many problems that people have, that we need to do this from the get-go. And we spent a lot of money on our installs. We didn't make much on our installs because I was using quality components and using the right stuff, but that's fine. I don't care. We're always going to do it, quality over quantity for sure. And so we were getting a lot of questions of, hey, I can't drive to you. I'm in Florida. I can't drive to you. Can you, basically, can I buy this? And so we said, all right, the demand is there. Let's build this thing. And so we built it, and now it's out there. And the great thing about it is it may be overkill for your system right now, but if you ever add, and guess what? We fishermen are never satisfied. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be there. You buy it once, and then no matter what your system goes to, you're not going to outrun this power harness because of the way we designed it. And it's built and it's designed on actual electrical principles, not just, I had an idea, let me do this. I said, okay, this is here. Here's a disconnect, here's a breaker, here's a fuse. And so it's trying to simplify it for the guys, because we fishermen would rather be fishing than messing around with our boats, quite frankly.
And when you also say at the beginning of this technology, a lot of the screens and graph and power demands outgrew the power supply options that were available, especially if you have a boat that's 3, 4, 5 years old and you're starting to put 12 and 16-inch graphs on it with.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, there was a time when I got made fun of for having a 9-inch graph on my boat, because
I get made fun of for having 9-inch graphs on my boat now, and it's because they're too small.
But it's the opposite way, right? I get made fun of because, like, oh my gosh, Mr. Moneybags. I'm like, no, I'm just whatever. But and to be fair, let's break this down. Those boats that are 5 or 6 year old, 10 years old, guys have boats that go all the way back to 2000. There's nothing wrong with it. But back then, the power demands were not what they are today. They're very small gauge wire. Boat manufacturers are starting to catch on, and in their defense, they've already got these boats designed, a year or two out. So it's hard to change as fast as technology changes to say, oh my gosh, we've got to redo this whole thing, this whole electrical system, because we didn't know that this power demand was going to be here. So they're catching up, in their defense for sure. But I will touch on what his question was real quick also, because I want to give him it kind of depends on where you're at. If you say, hey, I don't have anything. Well, you need a graph. You need a good graph to be able to see your charts, drop waypoints, good imaging, and you need a good trolling motor. At the end of the day, as much as the forward-facing sonar craze is there, and I love it, and you want it, but if you're starting from scratch, spend your money there on a good trolling motor, because at the end of the day, you make your money on the trolling motor. Is that a fair assessment, Matt? money's made on the trolling motor.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to fish without a trolling motor.
It is. It's darn near impossible. And there's a lot of really good options out there for sure. I mean, it's fun to be a fisherman. Let's just stop and accept that where we're at. From a fisherman standpoint, there are so many cool toys out that it's really fun to be where we're at. But you want a good graph with good imaging. If you're already there, say, hey, man, I've got a good graph. Do I upgrade whatever? I've got a good trolling motor. Now I'm going to go add that forward-facing sonar on there. I absolutely am. That's up there at the, my top 3 for sure.
All right, that works. So I had a giveaway for today, and then my truck went in for transmission.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's with that. It's been a long story. It involved police reports and video footage from multiple dealerships and transmission shops. Basically, they towed my truck. My transmission went out in Moore, found a transmission up in Broken Arrow. I pick it up a week later, after it got fixed, and I'm like, my bed cover's gone, which is a very expensive bed cover, flat bed cover. So I go into the deal. They pull up theirs. They're like, no, it came in without a bed cover. I call where the tow truck company picked it up from. It left with a bed cover. So during those 2 hours, bed cover disappeared. So I filed a police report for a stolen bed cover because those things don't just fly off.
Right.
And one of the repair shop called back. He goes, hey, my head tech just came in and looked at that footage. He said he wants you to go out and look at the top of your truck. And it is dinged and dented to heck. And the satellite radio thing is all destroyed. Well, they towed it backwards.
Oh, no.
And the wind caught underneath it and ripped the... So I say that to say, in the back of that truck with the transmission was today's giveaway. which was a really cool thing that's very apropos for this time of the year. Which is I want to get the name of it right. The A-Rig, what's it called?
The A-Rig holster.
The A-Rig holster.
Yeah.
So next week I will give away an A-Rig holster, Scott, to lucky listener on BTL, but I want to bring it in and show it. It's like the end-all be-all of A-Rig tangles, and you guys just announced it. You can get you're probably next level if you have more than 2 A-Rigs rigged up, but even if you just get one at $19.99, you can have an A-Rig in your boat, in your box, and on your front deck, and it will not get tangled in anything.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. We're pretty excited about it for sure. I keep 2 A-Rigs tied on, and one's light and one's heavy, right? Because just depending on the type of day and whatever. But yeah, it eliminates it, because the worst thing to do is pull up there, drop the troll motor, yank up your A-Rig, and oh, by the way, it's caught in the carpet. So now
there's 2 things that will always get tangled and will always be a pain in the butt, and it's braided line and A-Rigs. And I've gotten my teeth kicked in with my buddy in the front who throws with braid, and was always a fluorocarbon guy, but I'm 100% convinced now, if you're worried about the braid, there's still wires to it. I don't care, but you get a crisper punch, you get a better feel, you can slow it down, it goes deeper in the water because you have less drag. Anyway, now I'm combining the braided line with the 5 or 3 hooks, depending on where I'm fishing, and it's like the 2 nightmares colliding. But this will handle it. I don't think I'll fish with it on the rod, but you can, no problem. You can, but it just like pops on 5 little deals. So I'll have it in studio. I'll show it next week, but that was the Bass Tank giveaway, and you were supposed to be in studio, but all things considered, I greatly appreciate you coming on for an hour and dropping some knowledge, Scott. You have to come back in a month or 2. I've got a couple months off where I'm not on the road, where you can come in studio and you can like draw the diagrams, and we can just have a time and take some actual calls.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you having me. I'm sorry it worked out weather-wise, because I definitely want to be in studio.
Oh, yeah, you should be sorry for the weather, since you have so much control over that, Scott.
Yeah, I know it. It's but hopefully we've started to scratch the surface on it, because that's what I feel like we've done. There's still so much meat on the bone. We could absolutely have a single show on just 2D sonar alone, and
we might.
And we might.
I'm running the show now. I have a show whatever I want.
That's true. You can. We also didn't talk about waypoint management and boat positioning. I mean, and how to put everything together. You know, at the end of the day, I'll say this: everything is a tool. You know, you ask the question, does 2D still have a place? It absolutely does. Your down imaging still has a place. Your side imaging still has a place. Forward-facing sonar is a tool. There's times when to use it, and there's times when to not. It's just like anything. You know, I'm in this. If I'm sight fishing, I'm not using side imaging, right? I mean, I'm not really. I'm sight fishing. Now, these are specific applications, but everything is working. Think of it as a system, as opposed to a single device that ends all be all. And so, it's just exciting to be a fisherman because there are so many tools in the tool bag now. But anyway, so I appreciate you having me. I definitely will come back. You know, there's some tournaments coming up for me. I mean, we're getting ready to head to the Classic. You know, next week.
Yeah, Bass Tank will be at the Classic. I'll be at the Classic. I'll be in the Bass Tank booth.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be really fun. I'm excited. There's so many cool things that are released and announced and talked about at the Classic and a buzz around. It's just a fun atmosphere. You know, just as a consumer, come out and be, even if you don't buy anything, just come be a part of it. You know, if you're in that part of the world, come say hi at the Bass Tank booth. You know, we'd love to say hi to everybody and talk fishing. So
yeah, waypoint management, that needs to be on the list of things we talk about.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one because, you know, there's guys that aren't even professionals, but they have fished for years. And they're going to approach, I mean, it's not that hard to think about 5,000 waypoints, 10,000 waypoints. And someone says, man, that's a lot. But when you start thinking about over the years, it's not that hard to get there. And if you're not on top of that, it can overwhelm you. It gets to the point, I've got a lake that if I turn on my waypoints on, I'm like, I probably need to start cleaning some of these up because
it's just one giant waypoint.
It pretty much is. It's really funny. I sent a picture to somebody. I took a screenshot. I said, here, you can have all my waypoints for this lake. And they said, what am I going to do with this? I said, I have no idea because it looks like a giant waypoint. So
too much information.
It is. And
unless you have a waypoint management system and you know how to use it, which is
that's exactly right. So we can definitely do it. There's no shortage of things we can talk about. So I'll be glad to come on whenever you can fit me in and we'll make it work.
Heck yeah. Scott, thank you very much. Scott Palmer, the mad scientist from the Bass Tank. Also want to give a big shout out to Brad Fuller of the NPFL.
Yeah.
Head over there and watch their inaugural season. Watch John from the Bass Tank competing on Lake Cumberland for the second season. We will be back tomorrow, weather permitting, with day 4 with Uncle Frank. Until then, this has been BTL for Wednesday, February 23rd. We'll see you guys tomorrow.